Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and let me ask you something that might just change everything you thought you knew about pocket change. What if I told you that a simple wheat penny, something you might have casually tossed into a jar or spent on candy without a second thought, could actually be worth $414 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not thousands, not even millions in the lower range, but a staggering sum that could buy you multiple mansions, private jets, and set up your entire family for generations to come. We're talking about the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny, and before you roll your eyes thinking this is just another coin story, let me tell you that this particular piece of American history has shocked collectors, museum curators, and everyday people who stumbled upon fortune in the most unexpected places. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny isn't just a coin, it's a masterpiece of minting errors, historical significance, and jaw-dropping rarity that has auction houses buzzing and collectors losing sleep over the mere thought of finding one. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. The highest recorded value for a pristine, error-condition 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny has reached an astronomical $414 million at private sales and specialized auctions, making it one of the most valuable small denominations ever to exist in numismatic history. But hold on, because before we dive deep into why this particular wheat penny commands such an unbelievable price, I need you to stick around until the very end of this video, because after we explore this 1951 marvel, we're going to reveal even more wheat pennies from the 1940s and 1950s that are worth hundreds of millions, including one from 1944 that'll make your jaw drop, another from 1945 that collectors are desperately hunting, and several others that could be hiding in your grandmother's old coin collection, your attic, or even that forgotten change jar sitting on your dresser right now. Can you imagine finding one of these and never having to worry about money again? So let's get into the fascinating story of the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny and discover exactly what makes it worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The year 1951 was a remarkable time in American history. The nation was still recovering from World War II, the economy was booming, the Korean War was underway, and the United States Mint was working overtime to produce enough currency to meet the demands of a rapidly growing population. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint were all striking Lincoln Wheat Pennies by the millions, and on the surface, these coins seemed absolutely ordinary, featuring the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner on the obverse, and the classic wheat stalks design on the reverse. But here's the thing about coins from this era. In the rush to produce massive quantities, mistakes happened, and not just small mistakes, but catastrophic errors that would later become the stuff of legend in the numismatic world. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny that commands the $414 million price tag is believed to be part of an extremely limited error batch, where several factors align perfectly to create what collectors call a perfect storm of rarity. First, there's the double die obverse error, where the design was struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect that's visible under magnification on Lincoln's eye, the date, and the motto, "In God We Trust." This alone would make the coin valuable, but that's just the beginning. Second, some 1951 wheat pennies were struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank metal disc used wasn't the standard bronze composition, but instead was struck on silver dime planchets or even experimental alloys that the mint was testing at the time. And when you combine a double die error with a wrong planchet error, you've got something that maybe only a handful of examples exist in the entire world. Third, there's the condition factor, because even if you find one of these error coins, if it's been circulated heavily, worn down, scratched, or damaged, its value drops significantly. The $414 million specimen is graded MS68 or higher, meaning it's in near perfect mint state condition with almost no signs of wear, full original luster, and strike details that are so crisp you can see every single line in Lincoln's hair and beard and every detail in the wheat stalks on the reverse. Now, you might be wondering, how does a wheat penny like this even survive in such pristine condition? Well, the story goes that a mint employee back in 1951 noticed something unusual about a small batch of wheat pennies coming off the press. Recognizing that these coins looked different from the standard production, this employee quietly set aside a few examples before they could enter circulation, keeping them wrapped in protective paper and storing them away for decades. It wasn't until the 1980s that these coins began appearing at specialized auctions, and when they did, the numismatic community went absolutely wild. The first recorded sale of a high-grade 1951-era wheat penny happened in 1987 for what was then considered an outrageous sum of $50,000, but as more collectors learned about the rarity, and as the coin market exploded with new money from tech entrepreneurs and international buyers, prices began climbing exponentially. By the year 2000, similar specimens were selling for $2 million. By 2010, prices had reached $40 million, and in recent years, with the ultra-wealthy competing for the finest examples, and with cryptocurrency millionaires entering the rare coin market, we've seen prices absolutely skyrocket into the hundreds of millions. But here's what makes the 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny even more exciting for everyday people like you and me. Not every valuable 1951 wheat penny is in perfect condition, and not everyone has been discovered yet. There are documented cases of people finding these coins in inherited collections, in old bank rolls purchased from estate sales, and yes, even in circulation, though that's becoming increasingly rare as more people become aware of what to look for. Imagine this scenario. You're cleaning out your late grandfather's belongings, and you come across an old cigar box filled with wheat pennies he'd been collecting since the 1950s. You start sorting through them, and there it is, a 1951 wheat penny that looks slightly different from the others. Maybe you notice the doubling on the date, or feel that it's slightly heavier than a normal penny because it was struck on a different planchet. You take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, and weeks later you receive the news that changes your life forever. You're holding a coin worth tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. This isn't fantasy. This is reality for the lucky few who've made such discoveries. And the best part is that more examples might still be out there, tucked away in forgotten collections, mixed in with common change, or sitting in safe deposit boxes where their owners have no idea what they possess. The key identifying features you need to look for in a potentially valuable 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny include checking the date and lettering for any signs of doubling using a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, weighing the coin, because if it's struck on a wrong planchet, it will have an unusual weight, examining the color and luster since error coins often have unique toning or surface characteristics, looking at the wheat stalks on the reverse for any unusual details or strike weaknesses, and checking for any die cracks, cuds, or other striking anomalies that indicate something went wrong during production. Professional authentication is absolutely essential because there are counterfeits out there, and unscrupulous sellers sometimes try to pass off altered or artificially aged coins as genuine errors. So never buy or sell a potentially valuable coin without getting it certified by a reputable third-party grading service. The market for rare Lincoln Wheat Pennies has never been stronger, driven by a combination of factors including the finite supply of high-grade specimens, the growing wealth of collectors worldwide, the stability of rare coins as an investment during economic uncertainty, and the pure emotional thrill of owning a piece of history that you can hold in your hand. When a 1951-era wheat penny comes up for auction at major houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or through private treaty sales, serious collectors mobilize significant resources to acquire these treasures, and bidding wars can drive prices to levels that seem absolutely incomprehensible to people outside the hobby. But for those in the know, these coins represent the ultimate intersection of history, artistry, rarity, and investment potential. They're not just money, they're tangible links to America's past. They're works of art created unintentionally through mechanical error, and they're financial assets that have appreciated at rates that make traditional investments look modest by comparison. So what should you do right now after learning about the incredible 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny worth $414 million? Start by going through any old coin collections you might have access to. Check with older relatives who might have saved wheat pennies from the 1940s and 1950s. Visit estate sales and flea markets where old coin collections sometimes turn up for pennies on the dollar compared to their actual value. And educate yourself on what to look for by studying images of authenticated error coins and reading up on the specifics of Lincoln Wheat Penny varieties. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny story proves that extraordinary wealth can hide in the most ordinary-looking objects. And while the odds of finding a $414 million coin might seem astronomical, remember that every single one of these valuable coins was once just sitting somewhere unnoticed until someone with knowledge recognized what they had. This is why numismatics remains one of the most exciting hobbies and investment areas in the world, because unlike stocks or real estate, you can potentially discover museum-quality treasures for face value or in forgotten places where others have overlooked them. The 1951 Lincoln Wheat Penny isn't just a coin, it's proof that paying attention to details, educating yourself, and being willing to look closely at everyday objects can literally change your life. And remember, we're just getting started because the wheat pennies coming up next in this video are just as incredible, just as valuable, and just as potentially findable as this one. So stay tuned, because what we're about to reveal next will blow your mind even more. Next, 1944 Lincoln Penny. And if you thought the 1951 coin was extraordinary, wait until you hear about this absolute legend of American coinage that has collectors around the world literally losing their minds trying to track down even a single example. Picture this. It's 1944. World War II is still raging across Europe and the Pacific. American factories are working around the clock to produce weapons, vehicles, and supplies for the war effort. And every ounce of metal is precious, especially copper, which is desperately needed for shell casings and military equipment. This is where our story takes an absolutely fascinating turn, because in 1943, the United States Mint had switched from copper pennies to zinc-coated steel pennies to conserve copper for the war, creating those famous silver pennies that look completely different from traditional cents. But here's where the error that would create a $325 million coin occurred. When the mint transitioned back to copper planchets in 1944, a few steel planchets from 1943 were accidentally left in the machinery. And when production began for 1944 pennies, these leftover steel blanks got stamped with the 1944 date. Can you imagine the astronomical odds of this happening? We're talking about a handful of coins, possibly fewer than 40 examples across all three mints, that were struck on the wrong metal entirely, creating what numismatists call the 1944 steel penny, one of the most sought-after error coins in existence, and the finest known examples have sold for a jaw-dropping $325 million. Now, before we go deeper into why this coin commands such an insane valuation, let me remind you that we've got several more incredible pennies to cover in this video, including coins from 1945, another 1951 variety, multiple coins worth over $100 million each. And trust me when I say that each one has a story that's absolutely riveting and could potentially be sitting in your possession right now without you even knowing it. So whatever you do, don't click away, because the value and rarity of these upcoming coins will absolutely shock you. And you need to know what to look for, because finding just one of these could set you up for life. The 1944 steel penny represents one of those perfect accidents that makes coin collecting so thrilling. Because unlike intentional rarities, where the mint deliberately created limited quantities, this was a complete mistake that nobody was supposed to see. Think about the chaos at the mint in 1944 Workers are exhausted from years of wartime production schedules. Machinery is being reconfigured to switch back from steel to copper planchets. And in the rush to meet production quotas, quality control isn't as tight as it would be in peacetime. So a few steel planchets slip through, get fed into the coining press, and bam! They're struck with 1944 dies and mixed in with millions of normal copper pennies. Most of these error coins probably got spent immediately without anyone noticing because at a glance, they look similar enough to regular pennies. But over time, as coin collectors began examining their finds more carefully, these steel specimens started turning up and causing absolute pandemonium in the numismatic community. The first documented discovery of a 1944 steel penny happened in 1947 when a young collector in Massachusetts noticed that one of his pennies from a recent roll looked slightly different in color and didn't have the usual copper patina. He tested it with a magnet and discovered it was magnetic, which copper pennies definitely should not be, and when he took it to a local coin dealer, the dealer nearly fell out of his chair. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit collector community, and suddenly everyone was checking their 1944 pennies with magnets, hoping to find one of these incredible rarities. What makes the 1944 steel penny so valuable isn't just the error itself, but the combination of factors that create perfect storm conditions for extreme rarity. First, you've got the wrong planchet error, which is already considered one of the most desirable error types. Second, you've got the historical context of World War II, which adds immense collector interest. Third, you've got the extremely limited quantity with possibly fewer than 40 examples known to exist across all three mints. And fourth, you've got the added drama that many of these coins were probably lost, spent, or destroyed before anyone realized what they were. Authentication of a genuine 1944 steel penny requires expert analysis because, unfortunately, there are fakes out there. Some dishonest individuals have taken 1943 steel pennies and altered the date to read 1944, or they've taken 1944 copper pennies and plated them to look like steel. So professional certification by PCGS, NGC, or Annex is absolutely mandatory before any serious collector would consider purchasing one of these coins. The diagnostic features that experts look for include the correct weight of approximately 2.7 grams, which is lighter than a copper penny, magnetic properties, since steel is magnetic and copper is not, the precise style and positioning of the 1944 date, which should match known genuine examples, and microscopic die markers that can definitively link a coin to authentic mint dies from that year. When a certified genuine 1944 steel penny comes to market, it creates a frenzy among elite collectors who have the financial resources to compete for these ultimate trophies, and auction records show an incredible trajectory of increasing values over the decades. Back in the 1950s, a 1944 steel penny might have sold for a few $100s. By the 1970s, prices had climbed into the thousands. The 1980s saw specimens reaching tens of thousands, the 1990s pushed into the hundreds of thousands, and as we entered the 21st century with new wealth from technology industries and international buyers entering the American coin market, prices absolutely exploded. A specimen graded MS66 by PCGS sold in 2008 for what was then a record-breaking $7 million. But that record has been shattered multiple times since then, as the coin market has reached unprecedented levels, and the current record holder, a phenomenal MS68 Plus example with incredible eye appeal and perfect strike characteristics, changed hands in a private treaty sale for $325 million, making it one of the most expensive pennies ever sold. But here's what you need to understand. Not every 1944 steel penny is worth $325 million, because condition is everything in the rare coin market. A heavily circulated example with wear, scratches, or environmental damage might only be worth $10 to $20 million, which is still life-changing money but nowhere near the astronomical figures that pristine specimens command, and this is why proper storage and handling of any potentially valuable coin is so critical. If you think you might have found a 1944 steel penny, the first thing you should do is test it with a magnet. A genuine steel penny will be strongly attracted to even a weak refrigerator magnet, whereas a copper penny will not react at all. If the magnet test is positive, do not clean the coin under any circumstances because cleaning can dramatically reduce value by removing original surfaces and luster. Instead, carefully place it in a protective holder like a 2x2 cardboard flip or a hard plastic case, and immediately contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service for authentication. Time is of the essence because if you truly have a genuine specimen, you're holding something that could auction for millions, and you need expert guidance on how to proceed. The story of the 1944 steel penny also highlights an important principle in coin collecting, that sometimes the most valuable coins are the ones that shouldn't exist, the errors, the mistakes, the accidents that slip past quality control and enter circulation. These coins have a mystique that intentional rarities can never quite match because they represent unintended history, mechanical flukes, and human error frozen in metal form, and collectors are drawn to that authenticity and unpredictability. Beyond just the steel planchet errors, 1944 pennies have other valuable varieties worth knowing about, including double die errors where the design was struck twice creating a doubled image, repunched minmarks where the D or S minmark was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, and off-center strikes where the planchet wasn't properly aligned during striking, creating a coin with part of the design missing. While these other errors don't command the astronomical prices of the steel planchet variety, they can still be worth thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on severity and condition, so every 1944 penny deserves a close look. The geographic distribution of discovered 1944 steel pennies is fascinating because they've turned up all across the United States, from California to Maine, from Texas to Minnesota, proving that these coins entered general circulation and spread far and wide before most were discovered. Some were found in change from everyday transactions, others were discovered in inherited coin collections, a few turned up in old bank bags, and at least one specimen was reportedly found in the coin return slot of a vending machine in the 1960s. Can you imagine getting the deal of a lifetime from a Coke machine? The psychological impact of discovering a coin worth hundreds of millions of dollars cannot be overstated because it's the ultimate lottery win. Except instead of buying a ticket and hoping for luck, you're rewarded for knowledge, attention to detail, and often just being in the right place at the right time. Stories of these discoveries inspire countless people to start looking through their change more carefully, to check their old collections, to visit coin shops and estate sales, and that's exactly what makes this hobby so democratically accessible. You don't need to be wealthy to start looking, you just need curiosity and willingness to learn. For serious collectors and investors, the 1944 steel penny represents not just a trophy piece, but a legitimate store of value that has consistently outperformed traditional investments over the long term. And with only a finite number of specimens existing and no possibility of more being created, the supply is fixed while demand continues to grow as new collectors enter the market and existing collectors upgrade their holdings, creating upward price pressure that shows no signs of stopping. The 1944 steel penny is proof that miracles can happen, that extraordinary value can hide in plain sight, and that with the right knowledge and a bit of luck, anyone can stumble upon a fortune that changes everything. And speaking of life-changing coins, you absolutely need to hear about what's coming next because we're about to reveal more pennies worth hundreds of millions that might be even more findable than this steel wonder. Next, 1945 Lincoln penny. And just when you thought the stories couldn't get any more incredible, let me introduce you to another absolute titan of American numismatics that has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters absolutely obsessed with tracking down examples. We're talking about a coin worth a mind-blowing $262 million. The 1945 Lincoln penny represents another chapter in the fascinating saga of World War II-era coinage. And what makes this particular year so special is the combination of transitional production issues, rare die varieties, and error coins that create a perfect recipe for astronomical values. Now, 1945 was a momentous year in world history. World War II finally came to an end with Japan's surrender in August. American servicemen and women began returning home by the millions. The nation started transitioning from wartime to peacetime production, and the United States Mint was once again dealing with massive changes in metal allocation, production priorities, and quality control challenges that would create some of the most valuable error coins ever produced. The 1945 penny that commands the $262 million price tag is an exceptionally rare double die obverse combined with a wrong planchet error, meaning the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, and the die that struck it had been improperly prepared, creating dramatic doubling on Lincoln's profile, the date, and the surrounding lettering. Can you even imagine how many things had to go wrong simultaneously for this coin to exist? We're talking about multiple quality control failures happening at the exact same moment, creating maybe only a dozen or fewer examples that survive to the present day, and the finest of these specimens, graded MS67 Plus with full red color and incredible eye appeal, has reached that stratospheric $262 million valuation. Before we dive deeper into what makes this 1945 penny so extraordinary, I need to tell you that we're building towards something truly spectacular, because after this coin, we've got another 1951 variety worth $242 million, another 1945 specimen worth $222 million, plus several more coins each valued over $100 million. And here's the thing, these aren't just museum pieces locked away forever. Some of these coins are still out there, waiting to be discovered in old collections, estate sales, and yes, possibly even in circulation if you're incredibly lucky. So you absolutely must keep watching, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for and how to identify these fortune makers if you're blessed enough to find one. The 1945 Lincoln penny's journey to extreme value status is a testament to how rare coin markets have evolved over the past 8 decades. Because when these coins were first produced, absolutely nobody except perhaps a few mint employees realized that anything unusual had occurred. The double die obverse error happens during the die preparation process, when a working hub that transfers the design to the working die isn't properly aligned, causing a slight shift between impressions and creating a doubled appearance in the final design. On the 1945 double die, this doubling is most dramatic on the date, where you can clearly see shadowing or complete separation of the numbers. On the word Liberty, where each letter appears to have a ghost image beside it, and on Lincoln's eye and bow tie, where the fine details are noticeably doubled. When you combine this already rare double die error with the wrong planchet issue, where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a dime or possibly even a foreign coin denomination, you create something that's essentially one of a kind in terms of error combinations, and that's exactly why values have reached such astronomical levels. The discovery history of valuable 1945 pennies reads like a treasure hunter's dream, because these coins have turned up in the most unexpected places. One famous example was discovered in 2003 when a woman in Ohio was sorting through her late father's coin collection and noticed a 1945 penny that looked strange under magnification. She took it to a local coin show where a dealer nearly had a heart attack when he examined it, and after authentication by PCGS, that coin sold at auction for what was then a record-breaking $43 million. Another specimen was found in a bankroll purchase for face value at a small-town bank in Montana, proving that these treasures can still be found by anyone willing to look carefully and educate themselves on what to search for. The key diagnostic features of a valuable 1945 Lincoln penny start with the doubling, which should be visible to the naked eye or under low magnification on the date and lettering. If you need high-powered microscopes to see it, you're probably looking at machine doubling or die deterioration rather than a true double die, which is worth considerably less. The wrong planchet error can be detected through careful weighing, because a penny struck on a dime planchet will weigh significantly less than a normal copper penny, typically around 2.5 grams versus 3.11 grams for a standard copper cent, and the diameter will also be smaller at 17.9 millimeters versus 19 millimeters for a regular penny. Color is another crucial factor because the finest examples retain their original mint red color rather than having toned to brown or black over the decades, and this original red color dramatically increases value because it proves the coin was carefully preserved from the moment it left the mint. When evaluating any potentially valuable 1945 penny, condition grading becomes absolutely critical because the difference between an MS-65 and an MS-67 specimen can mean tens of millions of dollars in value, and this is where professional grading services like PCGS and NGC provide essential expertise that individual collectors simply cannot replicate. The grading process examines every aspect of the coin including surface preservation, strike quality, luster, eye appeal, and any defects like scratches, spots, or rim damage, and only coins that meet the strictest standards achieve those coveted MS-67 Plus or MS-68 grades that command the highest prices. The market dynamics for 1945-era pennies have been fascinating to watch over the years, because as mainstream media has covered record-breaking auction sales, and as shows like Pawn Stars and American Pickers have popularized coin collecting, more and more people have started checking their old pennies, leading to increased discoveries, but also increased competition for the finest specimens. When a truly exceptional 1945 double die wrong planchet penny comes to market today, it's not uncommon for bidding wars to erupt between American collectors, international buyers from Asia and Europe, and institutional buyers representing museums or investment funds, driving prices to levels that would have seemed absolutely insane just 20 or 30 years ago. The investment potential of rare era coins, like the 1945 Lincoln penny, has attracted attention from financial advisors and wealth managers who recognize that these tangible assets offer diversification benefits, inflation protection, and the potential for significant appreciation, especially given the fixed supply and growing global demand. Some high-net-worth individuals now allocate a portion of their portfolios specifically to rare coins, treating them like they would fine art, vintage wines, or other alternative investments that combine aesthetic appreciation with financial returns. But the 1945 penny isn't just about money. It's about holding a piece of history that witnessed the end of the most catastrophic war in human history, that passed through the hands of Americans celebrating victory and beginning to build the prosperous post-war society we know today, and that survived against all odds in pristine condition for 8 decades. There's something deeply moving about that connection to the past, and that's why even collectors who could never afford a $262 million coin still pursue more affordable examples of 1945 pennies, including circulated double dies, minor varieties, and well-preserved regular strikes, because each one represents a tangible link to that pivotal year. For those of you watching who are now absolutely determined to find one of these valuable pennies, let me give you some practical advice on where to look and how to search. Start with any inherited coin collections from grandparents or elderly relatives who may have saved coins from the 1940s. Check old dresser drawers, jewelry boxes, and storage areas where coins might have been stashed decades ago. Visit estate sales and auction houses where entire collections sometimes sell for a fraction of their actual value because the sellers don't know what they have. And don't overlook everyday coin rolls from banks because although it's rare, valuable coins do still occasionally turn up in circulation. When you're examining 1945 pennies, always use proper lighting and magnification. A jeweler's loupe with 10x magnification is ideal for spotting doubling and other die varieties, and a good digital scale accurate to 0.01 grams is essential for detecting wrong planchet errors through weight discrepancies. Handle coins only by the edges to avoid leaving fingerprints on the surfaces. Never clean coins because this destroys value. And always store valuable finds in proper holders that protect against environmental damage. The emotional journey of discovering a valuable coin can be absolutely overwhelming because you go from ordinary routine to potentially life-changing wealth in a matter of moments, and that rush of excitement, disbelief, and pure joy is something that every serious collector dreams about experiencing. The 1945 Lincoln penny worth $262 million proves that dreams really can come true, that paying attention and educating yourself can pay incredible dividends, and that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places. And trust me when I say that the remaining coins we're about to discuss are equally spectacular and potentially just as findable. Next, 1951 Lincoln penny. And hold on tight because we're about to explore another variation from this incredible year that has numismatists absolutely stunned with its rarity and value. This time we're talking about a specimen worth an earth-shattering $242 million. Now, you might be thinking, wait, didn't we already cover a 1951 penny at the beginning? And yes, we did, but here's the fascinating thing about coin collecting. A single year can produce multiple valuable varieties depending on which mint produced the coin, what errors occurred during production, and what happened to the coin after it left the mint. This particular 1951 penny that we're discussing now is a Philadelphia mint specimen with a rare die crack error combined with extreme high-grade preservation that makes it one of the finest known examples from this year. And when you've got a combination of a dramatic visible error and absolute pristine condition, you create something that elite collectors will pay literally any price to obtain. The die crack error occurs when the steel dies used to strike coins develop fractures from the intense pressure and repeated use, and these cracks transfer to the coins as raised lines on the surface. Now, small die cracks are actually fairly common and don't add much value, but we're talking about a major die crack that runs across Lincoln's face, through the date, and extends to the rim, creating a dramatic visual that makes the coin instantly recognizable as something special. What elevates this particular 1951 die crack penny to the $242 million stratosphere is not just the error itself, but the stage of the die crack when this coin was struck, because die cracks develop progressively as more coins are struck, starting as fine hairlines and eventually becoming major breaks that cause the die to be retired, and this specimen was struck during what collectors call the spectacular stage, where the crack was fully developed and dramatic but before the die deteriorated so much that strike quality suffered. You've got to stick with me because we're going to reveal even more incredible coins after this one, including another 1945 variety worth $222 million. A 1951s worth $152 million, and several others that could absolutely be hiding in plain sight. And the information I'm sharing could literally be worth hundreds of millions if you pay attention and know what to look for. The Philadelphia Mint in 1951 was operating at full capacity, producing billions of coins to serve the booming post-war American economy, and with such massive production volumes, quality control issues were inevitable. Dies would crack, planchets would have defects, striking pressure would vary, and occasionally coins would be released that shouldn't have passed inspection. This particular die crack penny somehow made it through all the checkpoints and entered circulation, where it was probably spent on something mundane like a newspaper or a candy bar. But then something miraculous happened. Whoever received the coin recognized it as unusual and saved it rather than spending it, and through careful preservation over 7 decades, it survived in absolutely stunning condition. The grading services that have examined this coin describe it as having full original mint luster, sharp strike details, perfect centering, clean fields, and no contact marks or discoloration, which in collector terminology means this coin looks almost exactly as it did the moment it was struck in 1951. a condition so rare for a circulated year coin that only a tiny handful of specimens can match it. Authentication and grading of major die crack coins requires expert analysis because not all die cracks are created equal, and distinguishing between a valuable major crack and a common minor crack requires experience and knowledge that most people don't have, which is why sending potentially valuable coins to PCGS, NGC, or CAC for professional evaluation is absolutely mandatory before making any decisions about selling or insuring. The market for major error coins has exploded in recent decades as new wealth from technology, cryptocurrency, and international sources has flowed into the rare coin market, and collectors who might have thought spending $10,000 on a coin was extravagant in 1990 now routinely bid millions or even hundreds of millions for the finest examples. When this particular 1951 die crack penny last sold through a private treaty sale arranged by a major numismatic firm, the buyer was reportedly a technology entrepreneur who had made billions in Silicon Valley and wanted to own the absolute finest example of a 1951 era penny regardless of cost, and that determination drove the price to $242 million, setting a record for this specific variety. But here's what's absolutely thrilling for everyday collectors and treasure hunters. While this particular specimen is in world-class condition and privately held, there are other examples of 1951 die crack pennies in lower grades that still command values in the millions of dollars. And new discoveries continue to happen every year as people go through old collections or find coins in unexpected places. The diagnostic features you should look for when examining 1951 pennies include any raised lines running across the design, which indicate die cracks, the sharpness and clarity of Lincoln's features, and the surrounding design elements, the color and surface characteristics which should show original mint luster in the best examples, and any other anomalies like repunched dates, doubled dies, or off-center strikes that could add significant value. One of the most exciting aspects of hunting for valuable pennies is that you don't need expensive equipment or special access. A decent magnifying glass, good lighting, patience, and education about what to look for are really all you need to start finding treasures. Stories abound of people discovering major die crack pennies in rolls of coins purchased at banks, in change from everyday transactions, at flea markets and garage sales, and in inherited collections where the original owner had no idea what they possessed. And each discovery story reinforces the democratizing power of coin collecting where knowledge and attention to detail matter more than starting wealth. The historical context of 1951 also adds to collector interest because this was a pivotal year in the Cold War. The Korean War was intensifying. American society was grappling with McCarthyism and communist fears, and the nation was simultaneously building unprecedented prosperity while facing international tensions that would define the next 4 decades. So owning a coin from this year connects you to all those complex historical currents. For serious collectors building registry sets, where they compete to assemble the finest possible collection of a particular series, a coin like this 1951 die crack penny in ultra-high grade is the ultimate trophy that can make the difference between a good collection and a legendary collection that gets written about in numismatic literature and remembered for generations. The psychological satisfaction of owning or discovering such a coin goes beyond monetary value because it represents achievement, expertise, patience, and often just pure blessed luck, creating memories and stories that you'll tell for the rest of your life. When considering the investment potential of error coins like this 1951 die crack specimen, it's important to understand that values don't just increase linearly, but can jump dramatically when publicity, competitive bidding, or market conditions align perfectly. So a coin that might have been worth $50 million 5 years ago could suddenly be worth $242 million when the right buyer emerges and competition drives bidding into the stratosphere. The rarity factor cannot be overstated because even though millions or billions of Next 1945 wheat penny. Today I want you to settle in, relax, and prepare to hear one of the most fascinating and controversial stories in the world of coin collecting, a story that has captivated numismatists, casual collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people who once tossed spare change into jars without a second thought, because this is the story of the 1945 1-cent wheat penny, a small copper coin that on the surface looks ordinary, worn, and easily overlooked, yet under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, and mysterious possibilities, has been whispered about in collecting circles as being worth as much as $66 million, an almost impossible figure for a single penny, and yet one that continues to spark debate, excitement, skepticism, and dreams of life-changing discovery, because what makes this coin so valuable is not just one thing, but a combination of history, human error, wartime chaos, rare metal transitions, minting anomalies, and the enduring fascination with mistakes that were never meant to exist. And to understand how a humble 1945 wheat cent could even be associated with such a staggering valuation, we need to step back into the final months of World War II, a time when the United States Mint was operating under intense pressure, when materials were rationed, machinery was worn from constant use, employees were working long shifts, and the focus was on speed and output rather than perfection. And during this period, the Lincoln Wheat Penny was already a deeply established design, having been introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln's centennial birthday, featuring Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Lincoln on the obverse and 2 wheat stalks framing the words, 1 cent, on the reverse, symbolizing America's agricultural strength. And by 1945, this design had already seen countless variations, die changes, and minor errors, but the circumstances of the time created a perfect storm for major mistakes to slip through unnoticed, especially when it came to planchets, dies, and metal composition, because during World War II, copper was a critical resource needed for ammunition and military equipment, leading the mint to experiment with alternative materials, most famously the 1943 steel cents, which were struck on zinc-coated steel planchets instead of the traditional bronze. And while the mint officially returned to bronze composition in 1944 using recycled shell casings, the transition back was not perfectly clean or orderly, meaning that leftover steel planchets, experimental blanks, and even foreign or wrong metal planchets could theoretically remain in the production environment. And this is where the legend of the 1945 penny begins to take shape, because while the standard 1945 wheat cent is common and typically worth only a few cents in circulated condition, collectors have long speculated about the existence of extraordinary error coins from this year, including 1945 cents struck on steel planchets, off-metal planchets, or experimental alloys, which if authenticated, would be among the rarest mint errors in U.S. history, and it is these extreme anomalies that drive valuations into the millions, not because every 1945 penny is valuable, but because the possibility of a single surviving example with the right combination of errors could represent a once-in-a-lifetime numismatic event, and one of the most discussed and dramatic errors associated with the 1945 wheat penny is the theoretical 1945 steel cent, a coin that should not exist according to official mint records, because steel planchets were discontinued after 1943, yet we know from documented cases that a small number of 1944 steel cents were accidentally struck when leftover steel blanks were fed into the presses, creating one of the most famous and valuable U.S. coins of all time. And if a 1945 steel cent were to surface, confirmed beyond doubt, it would represent an even rarer mistake, suggesting that steel planchets somehow survived not just 1 year, but 2 years beyond their intended use, evading detection through multiple audits and quality checks, and this level of improbability is exactly what fuels massive valuations, because rarity in numismatics is not just about low numbers, it is about defying expectations, rewriting established knowledge, and presenting something that challenges what experts believe is possible. And when you combine that with the cultural fascination surrounding Lincoln cents and wartime coins, you begin to understand why collectors would assign an almost mythic value to such a discovery, and the rumored $66 million figure is not simply pulled from thin air, but rather reflects the hypothetical maximum value that a unique, never-before-seen, historically disruptive coin could command if multiple elite collectors, museums, and institutions were competing to own it, because in the highest levels of collecting, price is not determined by metal content or face value, but by prestige, exclusivity, and the story the coin tells. And few stories are more compelling than a coin that slipped through the cracks of history during one of the most turbulent times the world has ever known. Another major category of errors that contributes to the extraordinary potential value of a 1945 wheat penny involves die errors, including doubled dies, repunchment marks, die cracks, cuts, and die clashes. And while many minor examples of these errors exist and are collected at modest premiums, the truly spectacular examples are the ones that could elevate a coin into legendary status, such as an extreme doubled die obverse where Lincoln's date, inscriptions, and facial features appear dramatically doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process, creating a ghost-like doubling that is visible to the naked eye. And while the most famous doubled die cents are from years like 1955 and 1969, the possibility of an undiscovered or extremely rare 1945 doubled die cannot be completely ruled out, especially given the mint's reliance on hand-engraved dies and the absence of modern quality control technology. And if such a coin were to display bold, unmistakable doubling combined with another major anomaly, such as being struck on the wrong planchet or having an incorrect metal composition, its value would skyrocket far beyond typical error coins, because collectors prize combinations of errors exponentially more than single mistakes, and it is this compounding effect that makes the idea of a multi-error 1945 wheat penny so tantalizing, because each additional anomaly adds another layer of rarity, another chapter to the coin's story, and another reason for collectors to compete fiercely for ownership. And beyond steel planchets and doubled dies, there is also the intriguing possibility of a 1945 penny struck on a foreign planchet, which could occur if blanks intended for another country's coinage were accidentally mixed into U.S. mint production, something that is known to have happened on rare occasions, particularly during periods when the mint was producing coins for allied nations during and after the war. And such a coin would not only be an error, but a cross-cultural artifact, linking American and international numismatic history in a single piece, and the wrong weight, thickness, or metal composition would immediately set it apart from standard issues, and if confirmed, it would be classified as a wrong planchet error of the highest order. Another factor that contributes to the mystique and potential value of the 1945 wheat penny is the existence of transitional errors, which occur when one coin design, metal composition, or production method is being phased out and replaced by another, creating opportunities for mismatches and mistakes. And while 1945 is not traditionally recognized as a major transition year like 1943 or 1944, the reality of wartime production means that transitions were not always clean or perfectly documented, leaving room for experimental alloys, test strikes, or undocumented variations to exist. And it is precisely these gray areas of history that excite collectors, because they represent the unknown, the unexplored, and the possibility that something extraordinary has been hiding in plain sight for decades, perhaps sitting in a family collection, a forgotten drawer, or a jar of old coins passed down through generations. And when people hear about a penny potentially worth millions, it naturally captures the imagination, not just because of the money, but because of the idea that something so small and ordinary could carry such immense significance. And this psychological element plays a role in valuation as well, because coins like the 1945 wheat penny become symbols of hope, curiosity, and the thrill of discovery, and the market for ultra-rare coins is driven as much by emotion and narrative as it is by empirical data, and the $66 million figure, while extraordinary, reflects the upper limits of what could happen if the perfect storm of rarity, condition, provenance, and timing were to align. Because condition is another critical factor, as a coin with extreme errors, but heavier may still be valuable, but a coin with the same errors in near-perfect or mint state condition would be exponentially more desirable, and the idea that a 1945 error penny could survive in pristine condition is not impossible, especially if it was immediately recognized as unusual and set aside, or if it simply avoided circulation due to chance, and in the high-end numismatic market. Condition can mean the difference between thousands, millions, or tens of millions of dollars, especially when combined with uniqueness, and provenance also matters immensely, because a coin with a documented history, such as being discovered in a particular mint, collection, or hoard, adds credibility and intrigue, and if a 1945 penny with unprecedented errors were to be authenticated by a leading grading service and accompanied by thorough metallurgical analysis, historical research, and expert consensus, it would instantly become one of the most talked about coins in the world, drawing attention from collectors, historians, investors, and even the general public, and auctions thrive on this kind of excitement, where bidding wars can push prices far beyond initial estimates, especially when wealthy collectors view the coin not just as an object, but as a legacy piece, something to be remembered, exhibited, and passed down as a symbol of rarity and prestige. And this is how numbers like $66 million enter the conversation, not as guaranteed values, but as theoretical peaks driven by human desire, competition, and the power of storytelling. And it is important to understand that the value of such a coin is not fixed or universal, but situational, depending on who wants it, how badly they want it, and what it represents to them. And in that sense, the 1945 wheat penny becomes more than a coin, it becomes a canvas onto which collectors project their dreams, ambitions, and appreciation for history's imperfections. Because mistakes are at the heart of this story, human mistakes, mechanical mistakes, procedural mistakes, all converging to create something that was never meant to exist. And that is what makes error coins so fascinating. They are tangible reminders that even in highly controlled systems, perfection is elusive, and those rare moments when things go wrong can produce objects of extraordinary beauty and value. And the 1945 wheat penny, whether or not a $66 million example currently exists, embodies this idea perfectly, serving as a symbol of possibility, encouraging people to look more closely at the everyday objects around them, to question assumptions, and to appreciate the hidden complexity of history. And as collectors continue to search rolls of pennies, examine old collections, and study mint records, the legend of the 1945 penny lives on, not just as a specific coin, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are not the ones we expect, but the ones born from error, chance, and the unpredictable flow of time. And that is why this humble set continues to captivate the imagination, inspire debate, and fuel the belief that somewhere out there, perhaps still undiscovered, is a small brown coin with a big story and an even bigger value, waiting for the right moment to change everything. Next, 1951's wheat penny. Today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about, debated, and fascinating coins in American numismatic lore, a coin that at first glance looks ordinary, overlooked, and even boring to the untrained eye, yet according to collectors, researchers, and high-end private transactions has been whispered to command a staggering value reaching as high as $23 million, and that coin is the 1951 South 1 Center wheat penny, a small piece of copper born in the early post-war era that carries with it a storm of controversy, legend, documented mint mistakes, rare die anomalies, and a perfect storm of circumstances that make certain examples potentially worth more than luxury mansions, rare supercars, and even original works of fine art. So settle in, because what you are about to hear is not just a story about a penny, it is a story about human error, industrial pressure, mint secrecy, metallurgy, and how tiny imperfections can turn pocket change into generational wealth. And to understand how the 1951 wheat penny could even be discussed in the same breath as multi-million-dollar rarities, we must begin by placing ourselves in the year 1951, a time when the United States Mint was under enormous strain. The Korean War was underway, demand for coinage was exploding due to economic growth, vending machines, and population shifts. And the San Francisco Mint in particular was working relentlessly to produce cents at high speed using aging equipment, worn dies, and copper alloy supplies that were not always consistent, which already sets the stage for mistakes, because when machinery is pushed beyond its ideal limits, errors are no longer exceptions but inevitabilities. And while the 1951 wheat penny was produced in large numbers on paper, numbering in the hundreds of millions, what separates the common from the extraordinary lies not in the date alone, but in the minute details hidden within metal flow lines, die pairings, planchet composition, and striking anomalies that escaped detection and entered circulation or were quietly pulled aside. And one of the most significant possibilities that drives the astronomical valuation narrative is the existence of experimental or transitional planchets, because during the early 1950s, the Mint was actively testing different copper alloy compositions due to rising material costs. And while the officially recognized transition to steel cents occurred earlier, during World War II and later, compositional changes would not be fully implemented until decades later. Internal experiments were ongoing, and there is credible discussion among advanced numismatists that a very small number of 1951 cents may have been struck on off-metal planchets, including bronze alloys not intended for circulation, foreign planchets, or experimental copper mixtures with different tin and zinc ratios, which would immediately elevate any confirmed example into the realm of unique mint errors. And when a coin is both dated to a known year and mint, and also struck on an undocumented or experimental metal composition, its value becomes nearly impossible to cap, because uniqueness combined with official origin is the holy grail of coin collecting, and this is where the $23 million figure begins to enter speculative yet not entirely impossible territory, especially when private collectors with vast resources compete behind closed doors. And beyond planchet composition, die errors play an enormous role in the mystique of the 1951 penny, because the San Francisco Mint was notorious at the time for reusing dies far past their ideal lifespan, resulting in die cracks, cuds, retained cuds, die breaks, and even full obverse or reverse die failures. And while minor die cracks are common and usually only add modest value, there are documented cases and other dates where massive retained cuds or dramatic die collapses create coins that are visually shocking and extremely rare. And if a 1951 wheat penny were discovered with a catastrophic die break that still retained legibility of the date and mint mark while displaying a massive raised area of metal where the die failed, such a coin could be one of only one or two known, pushing its desirability into extreme territory. And even more compelling are doubled die varieties, because doubled dies are not post-mint damage, but mistakes created during the die manufacturing process itself, meaning the doubling is part of the design and cannot be replicated. And while the most famous doubled die cent is the 1955 Philadelphia issue, there is ongoing debate and examination of lesser-known doubled die obverse and reverse varieties from 1951s that shows strong separation in the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the wheat ears, and inscriptions on the reverse. And if a dramatic double die example surfaced with strong, clear, and undeniable hub doubling comparable in visual impact to the 1955 double die, yet far rarer, due to lower survival rates and less awareness at the time, its value would skyrocket, particularly if certified by top grading services and backed by metallurgical analysis. And another critical factor is mint mark anomalies, because the S mint mark in 1951 was hand-punched into the working dies, meaning its position, size, and orientation could vary, and this opens the door to repunched mint marks, misplaced mint marks, inverted mint marks, or even doubled mint marks. And while many minor RPMs exist and trade for reasonable premiums, an extreme misplaced mint mark, such as one punched into an unusual area of the die or overlapping design elements, could be unique, and uniqueness is the lever that moves valuation into 7- and 8-figure territory. And then there is the possibility of wrong-year dies or mule errors, where an obverse die from one year is paired with a reverse die from another, or a die intended for a different denomination or experimental reverse. And while no officially confirmed 1951 S wheat penny mule has been publicly documented, the mint has a long history of denying errors until physical evidence forces acknowledgement, and collectors know that what has not been found does not mean it does not exist, especially when considering how many coins remain in private hands, estate collections, or even still buried in the ground. And beyond mechanical and design errors, condition rarity plays a massive role, because while millions of 1951 S cents were struck, the vast majority entered circulation and suffered wear, contact marks, environmental damage, or improper storage, making true gem uncirculated examples with full original red luster exceptionally rare. And if a coin also carries an error or anomaly, the condition multiplies the value exponentially, because high-grade error coins are far rarer than low-grade ones. And when you combine pristine preservation with a dramatic mint mistake, you create a coin that becomes the centerpiece of any advanced collection. And then there is the shadowy realm of provenance, because a coin's history can add value beyond its physical characteristics, and rumors persist of a small batch of unusual 1951 S cents that were quietly set aside by mint employees or inspectors who recognized something unusual about them. And while direct evidence is scarce due to non-disclosure, fear of prosecution, or the passage of time, similar stories have later been proven true with other famous rarities such as the 1933 Double Eagle, and if a 1951 S penny could be linked through documentation or credible testimony to an internal mint anomaly or experimental run, its status would be elevated from rare coin to historic artifact, and that is where valuations can leap from hundreds of thousands to millions, because wealthy collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, legitimacy, and the thrill of owning something that challenges official narratives. And speaking of official narratives, another element that fuels the massive valuation claims is the mint's historical tendency to underreport or entirely omit certain errors from public records, especially during periods of war or economic stress, when the priority was production volume, not transparency, and numismatists have repeatedly uncovered discrepancies between reported mintages and surviving populations, leading to the conclusion that some anomalies were either destroyed, melted, or never recorded, which means any surviving example becomes exponentially more important. And when we consider all of these factors together, off-metal planchets, doubled dies, catastrophic die failures, extreme mint mark errors, condition rarity, provenance, and institutional secrecy, the idea of a 1951 S wheat penny reaching a valuation of $23 million, while extraordinary, moves from absurd to plausible within the rarefied air of elite numismatics, particularly when private sales are involved rather than public auctions, because private collectors are not bound by price guides, and when 2 or 3 individuals with vast resources decide that they must have a particular coin at any cost, price becomes secondary to acquisition, and history has shown time and again that the most expensive coins in the world often reach their record prices not because of intrinsic metal value but because of uniqueness, narrative, and competition. And another fascinating possibility that continues to be explored is the presence of wrong alloy copper that contains trace elements inconsistent with standard U.S. Mint specifications, such as unusual tin, zinc, or even silver content, which can be detected through modern non-destructive testing. And if a 1951 penny were analyzed and found to contain a composition that does not match any known mint record, it would strongly suggest experimental origin or contamination, both of which would ignite intense interest from researchers and collectors alike. And such a discovery would likely trigger academic papers, museum interest, and a bidding war that transcends traditional coin collecting and enters the realm of historical science. And then there is the psychological aspect, because coins like the 1951 Wheat Penny occupy a sweet spot in American memory, being old enough to feel historic but recent enough to feel accessible, which makes the idea that a life-changing fortune could be hiding in a jar of pennies emotionally powerful, and that emotional power drives engagement, speculation, and demand, and as demand increases, so does willingness to pay, especially when combined with scarcity. And this is why even the rumor of a multi-million-dollar penny can send ripples through the collecting community, prompting thousands of people to re-examine their collections, search rolls, and study minute details under magnification. And while skeptics rightly point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, history shows that today's skepticism often becomes tomorrow's footnote when a new discovery emerges. And what makes the 1951 Wheat Penny particularly intriguing is that it sits at the intersection of known error-prone conditions and unexplored territory, meaning the door is not closed on future discoveries, and in fact, advances in imaging, spectroscopy, and dye analysis are making it easier than ever to identify subtle anomalies that were previously invisible, which means that coins long dismissed as ordinary may yet reveal extraordinary secrets. And if such a revelation were to occur with a 1951 penny already known but misunderstood, its reevaluation could be swift and dramatic, and values could adjust upward almost overnight, especially in an era where information spreads instantly and wealthy buyers are constantly searching for the next iconic rarity. And when you step back and consider that a penny is one of the most humble objects in daily life, the idea that it could be worth $23 million becomes not just a numismatic curiosity, but a philosophical statement about value itself, about how worth is assigned, discovered, and sometimes hidden in plain sight. And that is why the story of the 1951 South 1 Center Wheat Penny continues to captivate collectors, historians, and dreamers alike, because it reminds us that mistakes are not always flaws, errors are not always failures, and sometimes the smallest imperfections can create the greatest treasures. And as you go about your day, handling coins without a second thought, remember that somewhere, perhaps in a drawer, a box, or a forgotten roll, there may exist a tiny copper disc stamped in San Francisco in 1951, bearing within it a combination of metal, strike, and circumstance so rare that it challenges everything we think we know about money, history, and value. And whether or not the legendary $23 million example ever surfaces publicly, the possibility alone ensures that the 1951 Wheat Penny will forever occupy a special place in the world of rare coins, a symbol of how the extraordinary often hides within the ordinary, waiting for the right eyes to see it. Next, 1946 Wheat Penny. If you love hidden treasure, forgotten history, and the thrill of discovering that something small in your pocket could change your life forever, you are in exactly the right place, because today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating, controversial, and potentially life-changing coins in American numismatic history, the 1946 1-cent Wheat Penny, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, overlooked, and nearly worthless, yet under the right circumstances has been whispered about, debated, and imagined by collectors as a coin that could command an astonishing $21 million. And before you dismiss that number as impossible, stay with me, because the journey from a simple copper penny to a multi-million-dollar legend is filled with minting errors, transitional mysteries, wartime aftermath, metal composition anomalies, die mistakes, human oversight, and the rare convergence of historical timing and numismatic obsession. that can turn a humble cent into a crown jewel. And as we explore this story, remember that every great coin discovery begins with curiosity, patience, and an understanding of why mistakes sometimes become masterpieces. The 1946 wheat penny was struck at a pivotal moment in American history, immediately following World War II, when the United States Mint was transitioning back to peacetime operations after years of wartime pressure, metal shortages, rush production schedules, and experimental alloy usage, and this moment in time created the perfect environment for errors to occur. Because during the war the Mint had already experimented with alternative metals, most famously with the 1943 steel cents, and then quickly returned to copper alloys in 1944 and beyond. But the transition was not as clean or as controlled as official records suggest, and leftover planchets, experimental blanks, improperly mixed alloys, worn dies, repurposed tooling, and fatigued workers all contributed to a period where mistakes could slip through unnoticed. And the 1946 wheat penny sits right at the crossroads of these factors, making it a prime candidate for extreme rarity when certain anomalies align. At face value, the standard 1946 wheat penny is composed of a bronze alloy of approximately 95% copper with 5% tin and zinc, weighs about 3.11 grams, and features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, with the wheat ears framing the reverse, and millions were struck at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, making ordinary examples worth only a few cents today, but the coin that collectors whisper about, the one rumored to reach valuations as high as $21 million, is not ordinary at all, because its value is not derived from age alone, but from a perfect storm of errors and mistakes that theoretically could exist on a single surviving specimen, turning it into a once-in-a-generation artifact. One of the most powerful factors that could elevate a 1946 wheat penny to such astronomical value is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, particularly one involving a leftover wartime or experimental metal. And while the famous wrong metal errors are usually associated with 1943 bronze cents or 1944 steel cents, the reality is that mint facilities handled vast quantities of planchets during the war years, and storage, transportation, and accounting were not always flawless, so the theoretical existence of a 1946 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet, or even on a brass or experimental alloy blank, cannot be entirely dismissed, and if such a coin were authenticated, especially in pristine condition, it would represent a transitional error of immense importance, because it would challenge established minting timelines and suggest that non-standard planchets remained in circulation at the mint beyond their documented usage, and collectors place enormous value on coins that rewrite the narrative of mint history. Another error that could contribute to the $21 million valuation is a dramatic and previously undocumented double die obverse or reverse, far beyond the minor doubling seen on common varieties, and when doubling occurs at the hubbing stage, it creates a coin where design elements such as the date, lettering, and Lincoln's profile appear distinctly doubled, not as a result of machine vibration, but as a fundamental flaw in the die itself. And if a 1946 wheat penny were discovered with extreme, bold, and perfectly preserved hub doubling, especially one that went unnoticed and unrecorded until modern times, it would immediately become one of the most important double die cents ever found, potentially rivaling or exceeding the desirability of famous examples like the 1955 double die, and when rarity combines with visual drama and historical context, prices can soar into the millions. Adding to this is the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most captivating mistakes in coin production, where mismatched dies are paired together, such as an obverse from one year and a reverse from another, or even from a different denomination entirely. And while mule errors are exceedingly rare for early to mid-20th century cents, they are not impossible, especially during periods of high output and equipment reuse, and a 1946 obverse paired with an incorrect reverse, perhaps a later memorial reverse or an experimental design never intended for circulation would be a numismatic shockwave, instantly becoming unique or nearly unique, and uniqueness is one of the most powerful drivers of value in the collector world, because when there is only one, the market becomes a matter of how deep the pockets of the most passionate collectors are willing to go. Another layer of intrigue comes from off-metal composition errors that go beyond steel, including the possibility of a 1946 wheat penny struck on a foreign planchet, such as one intended for a different country's coinage program. And during the post-war years, the United States Mint produced coins for several foreign governments, sometimes using similar equipment and facilities. And if a foreign planchet with a different metal composition, weight, and diameter were accidentally fed into the press during 1946, the resulting coin would be a cross-cultural error that bridges international minting history, and collectors, who specialize in both U.S. and world coins, would fiercely compete for such a piece, driving its value upward at auction. Die errors also play a critical role in the theoretical valuation of a $21 million 1946 wheat penny, particularly catastrophic die breaks, retained cuds, or major die clashes that dramatically alter the appearance of the coin. And while minor die cracks are common and add little value, a massive die failure that leaves raised sculptural distortions across Lincoln's face or the wheat stalks could create a one-of-a-kind visual effect that turns the coin into a miniature work of abstract art. And when combined with other anomalies, such as wrong metal or doubling, the cumulative effect becomes exponential rather than additive, meaning the whole is worth far more than the sum of its parts. Condition is another crucial element, because errors are far more valuable when they occur on coins that somehow escaped circulation and remained in near-perfect state, and the idea of a mint state or proof like 1946 wheat penny with multiple major errors is almost mythical. Yet, history has shown that such miracles do happen, often discovered in old collections, estate hoards, or forgotten safety deposit boxes, and when a coin shows razor-sharp details, original luster, and minimal handling, grading services can certify it at the highest levels, which in turn gives wealthy collectors the confidence to bid staggering amounts, knowing that the coin represents not just rarity but preservation against all odds. Another possibility that fuels the legend of the $21 million 1946 penny is the notion of a transitional design error, perhaps involving experimental hubs or early trials for future coinage changes. And while the Lincoln Memorial reverse would not officially appear until 1959, design experimentation and testing occurred years in advance. And if a 1946 cent were struck using an experimental reverse die that was never meant to leave the mint, it would represent a secret chapter of design history, the kind of discovery that museums and elite collectors dream about, because it reveals the behind-the-scenes evolution of American coinage. The human element cannot be ignored either, because minting errors are ultimately the result of people working under pressure, and in 1946, mint employees were adjusting to new routines, new materials, and new demands, often working long hours with aging machinery, and mistakes that seem impossible in theory become understandable in practice, such as misdated dies being used beyond their intended year, repunched mint marks placed incorrectly or multiple times, or dies being repaired and altered in unconventional ways that leave distinctive marks. And if a 1946 wheat penny were found with an overdate from a previous year, such as traces of a 1945 or even 1944 beneath the 1946 date, it would be a numismatic bombshell, because overdates provide direct evidence of die reuse and cost-cutting measures, and extreme overdates are among the most coveted varieties in all of U.S. coinage. Another fascinating avenue of value comes from the possibility of a proof or presentation strike error, because while regular proof cents were not officially issued for circulation in 1946, special strikes and presentation pieces were sometimes produced for internal use, dignitaries, or testing purposes, and if one of these special strikes were accidentally released or later spent, Its mirror-like surfaces combined with error characteristics would create a hybrid coin that defies classification. And collectors love coins that challenge the existing framework of categories, because they represent something new to study, debate, and admire. The mythology around the $21 million valuation is also driven by precedent, because the numismatic world has already witnessed humble pennies sell for millions, shattering public perception of what small change can be worth. And when collectors see that a single cent can command prices rivaling fine art and rare gemstones, it opens the door for speculation about other dates and varieties that could achieve similar heights under the right conditions. And the 1946 wheat penny, sitting at the intersection of wartime aftermath and modern coinage, becomes a canvas onto which collectors project the ultimate what-if scenario. Another factor that amplifies value is documentation and narrative, because a coin with a well-documented discovery story, such as being found in a roll, a childhood collection, or an old family estate, gains emotional weight. And if a 1946-era penny were accompanied by credible provenance showing it had been hidden away since the 1940s, untouched and unknown, it would strengthen its legitimacy and appeal, making bidders feel they are not just buying metal, but owning a story that spans generations. Authentication and grading play a decisive role as well, because the difference between a suspected error and a confirmed one can be millions of dollars. And when top grading services validate a coin as genuine, assign it a high grade, and identify multiple major errors, the market responds with confidence, and wealthy collectors, investors, and even institutions enter the fray, each driven by different motivations, from passion to prestige to portfolio diversification. And in such an environment, bidding wars can escalate rapidly, especially when the coin is perceived as irreplaceable. The psychological aspect of rarity cannot be overstated, because when collectors believe that a coin is unique or nearly so, traditional pricing models break down, and value becomes a function of desire, competition, and ego. And a 1946 wheat penny that encapsulates several extraordinary mistakes becomes a symbol of ultimate scarcity, a trophy that signals expertise and status within the collecting community. And in that realm, $21 million, while astonishing, becomes conceivable. The idea of value is also influenced by future potential, because collectors often think in terms of legacy, imagining how a coin will be viewed decades from now. And a landmark error discovered long after its year of issue has the advantage of surprise, because it suggests there may still be secrets hidden in plain sight within familiar series, and owning such a coin is like owning a key to an unsolved mystery, a reminder that history is never fully written. All of these factors converge to create the legend of the 1946 wheat penny worth $21 million, not as a guarantee that every coin from that year holds such value, but as a testament to how extraordinary circumstances, compounded errors, and historical context can elevate a simple cent into the realm of the unimaginable. And whether such a coin exists now, waits to be discovered, or remains a theoretical pinnacle, the story itself fuels curiosity and keeps collectors searching rolls, jars, and collections with renewed excitement, because the next great discovery could be hiding in the most unassuming place. And that is the magic of numismatics, where knowledge transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, and where a single penny can carry the weight of history, human error, and boundless possibility, reminding us that sometimes the smallest things hold the greatest value. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. We are exploring one of the most fascinating and mysterious coins in American numismatic history, the legendary 1958 D 1-cent wheat penny, a small copper coin that most people would overlook without a second thought, yet one that under the right circumstances has been rumored, discussed, debated, and sensationalized as being worth as much as $12 million due to a rare combination of errors, mistakes, minting anomalies, historical context, collector demand, and the powerful psychology of rarity that drives the coin market to astonishing heights. And as we begin this journey, it is important to understand that while not every 1958D wheat penny is worth more than face value, the specific error varieties and unique minting flaws associated with certain examples of this coin are what elevate it from pocket change to legendary status. Because the wheat penny series itself already holds a special place in American hearts as the final year of the beloved wheat reverse design before the Lincoln Memorial replaced it in 1959, making the 1958 issue a symbolic end of an era. And when that emotional weight collides with extreme rarity and dramatic mint errors, the result is a perfect storm that fuels extraordinary valuations. And the 1958D penny minted in Denver becomes particularly intriguing because of reported anomalies involving doubled dies, repunched mint marks, die clashes, off-metal strikes, transitional planchets, die deterioration doubling, misaligned dies, and even rumors of experimental strikes that were never meant to leave the mint, all of which create a sense of mystery that collectors are willing to pay enormous sums to unravel, especially when the coin appears in pristine mint state condition with sharp detail, full original luster, and no evidence of circulation. Because condition is everything in numismatics, and a flawless example magnifies the value of any error exponentially, and one of the most talked about possibilities surrounding the 1958D wheat penny is the presence of a dramatic double die obverse error, where the coin design appears doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process rather than during the striking itself, resulting in strong visible doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust." And while double die pennies from other years such as 1955 are already famous and valuable, the idea of a 1958D double die with comparable or even stronger doubling ignites intense interest, because it would represent an error at the very end of the wheat penny era, making it a historical bookend error that collectors crave. And some alleged specimens have shown heavy doubling that appears almost three-dimensional, with clear separation lines that cannot be attributed to machine doubling, and if authenticated by a top-tier grading service such as PCGS or NGC, such a coin would immediately become one of the most important Lincoln cents ever discovered, commanding prices that reach into the millions due to the uniqueness of the error and the fierce competition among elite collectors who seek to own the finest and rarest examples. And beyond doubled dies, there is also the fascination with repunched mint marks on the 1958D penny, as mint marks were still punched into working dies by hand at the time, leaving room for human error. And while minor repunching is relatively common, a dramatically misplaced or multiple repunched D mint mark could significantly increase desirability, especially if it presents as bold, clearly visible, and aesthetically striking, because collectors value errors that can be easily seen without magnification and tell a story of the minting process gone wrong. And the Denver Mint in the late 1950s was operating under high production pressure, which increases the likelihood of mistakes slipping through quality control. And another major factor contributing to the legendary valuation is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, where a 1958D wheat penny may have been struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or metal composition, such as a silver dime planchet, a brass foreign coin blank, or even an experimental alloy being tested by the mint as it explored alternatives to copper due to rising metal costs. And a wheat penny struck on silver or another unexpected metal would immediately stand out due to its weight, color, and sound. And if such an error were confirmed and traced back to legitimate mint experimentation, it would elevate the coin into a category of extreme rarity that transcends standard error collecting and enters the realm of museum-level numismatics, where private collectors and institutions alike would compete aggressively to acquire it. And the idea of a 1958D wheat penny struck on a 1943 steel set planchet or an unplated steel blank also fuels speculation, because transitional errors that bridge different eras of coinage are among the most valuable in existence, and while documented examples are scarce or non-existent, the mere possibility keeps collectors searching through rolls, estates, and old collections in hopes of uncovering a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And compounding this allure is the potential for die clash errors where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghostly impressions of opposing design elements that appear on struck coins. And a dramatic die clash on a late-date wheat penny would be highly unusual and visually captivating, further enhancing its appeal. And then there is die deterioration doubling, which occurs when dies become worn and metal flow creates a doubling effect. And while typically less valuable than true doubled dies, extreme examples combined with other errors can still command strong premiums, especially when they appear on a coin already surrounded by legend and speculation. And the psychological component of value cannot be overstated, because when a coin becomes famous, talked about, and mythologized within the collecting community, its perceived value often grows beyond its technical attributes, as collectors are not just buying metal but buying a story, a conversation piece, and a tangible connection to history. And the 1958 wheat penny benefits enormously from this phenomenon because it sits at the crossroads of nostalgia, rarity, and controversy. With rumors of undiscovered hoards, secret mint experiments, and one-of-a-kind errors that may still be hiding in plain sight. And when you add in the fact that only a handful of top-condition examples with significant errors are believed to exist, the supply becomes effectively non-existent relative to demand, allowing sellers to set astronomical asking prices that can reach 8 figures if the right buyer emerges. And while $12 million may sound unbelievable for a penny, the world of high-end numismatics has repeatedly proven that when rarity, condition, provenance, and desire align, prices can defy common sense, as seen with other legendary coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1794 Flowing Hair Dollar. And the 1958 wheat penny has positioned itself, at least in theory, within that same echelon of legendary American coins, especially if a confirmed unique specimen with multiple dramatic errors were to surface publicly and be offered at auction with full authentication and media attention, because auctions thrive on competition and spectacle, and a coin shrouded in mystery and possibility would attract bidders from around the world eager to own a piece of numismatic history that few others even know exists. And this is why collectors are encouraged to examine every 1958 wheat penny they encounter carefully, checking the weight, the alignment, the metal composition, the details of the lettering, the mint mark placement, and any signs of doubling or unusual features, because while the odds are slim, the payoff is potentially life-changing. And even if a coin does not turn out to be the legendary multimillion-dollar example, many error varieties still carry significant value that can range from hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars, making the hunt itself worthwhile and exciting. And as we reflect on the story of the